Few can compete with Dolly Parton and Elvis Presley when it comes to fame. Both singers dazzled on stage and screen, amassing a flock of admirers by the time their paths crossed in the 1970s. But not many people are aware of how the two artists interacted and why it ended in bitter rejection for the king himself. Always got what he wanted. By the time Dolly had her first hit album in 1967, Elvis had already been famous for years. He achieved his first #1 single in Heartbreak Hotel, which was all across the radio in 1956. A slew of hit songs followed, making him the star of the rock and roll scene. And a sought-after movie and TV star, too. In other words, it was a rarity to see the king rejected. I do. And by 1967, both Elvis and Dolly had committed to their respective partners. He wed Priscilla Bulu that year, and Dolly got hitched to Carl Thomas Dean, to whom she remains married in 1966. But the famous halves of each couple came together in the 1970s. It was a meeting that left the songstress heartbroken for decades to come, reduced to tears. After turning down Elvis, Dolly admitted that she had sobbed for hours. In fact, according to M.A., it was an entire night of heartache, she admitted. I cried all night long, 'cause I was so disappointed. I loved Elvis, and I'm sure he was as disappointed as I was because he had it worked up and ready to go. Can't let go. The pain of rejecting the king still hurts Dolly to this day. She said that she wished she could have had just one more conversation with Elvis to smooth things over. The songwriter has even said that she would tell him, "I still dream about you singing that song." But what led to this great heartbreak Dolly has yet to let go. Left no clues. Dolly and Elvis superfans may now be racking their brains for telltale signs of the pair's emotional fallout in any one of their many records about love. Unfortunately, you won't find the story written into any of their most famous tracks. Instead, Dolly had to reveal what really happened by herself many years later, and it's a surprising tale, to say the least. A triple threat. Over her long and illustrious career, Dolly has graced stages and screens as both a singer and an actress. But to her, the most important part of her years in the limelight has always been her songwriting, as she told American Songwriter magazine in 1989. I've always prided myself as a songwriter more than anything else. That's my personal feelings. It's not about the fame. Dolly is a prolific songwriter, and you can probably name at least one of her songs off the top of your head. Go on. Try it. Coat of Many Colors, To Daddy, Jolene, the Grammy-winning 9 to 5. The list goes on. But for the legendary songstress, her craft isn't about winning awards, but rather the satisfaction she feels personally after writing something great. It's therapy. It's fun. It's creative. Dolly said, "It's therapy. It's fun. It's creative. I love getting on a big writing binge and staying up a couple days working on a song and knowing at the end of those 2 or 3 days that I've created something that was never in the world before. It's like a feeling of creating, not that the same stories ain't been told before, but it ain't been told through my point of view." Sharing the love. Many of Dolly's songs have ended up on her own records, but she also enlists other artists to record or even re-record her work too, she told the magazine. "I'm always flattered that anybody would record my songs, even if they change them." The Jolene singer said that she felt that way even when she didn't quite agree with another artist's interpretation of her lyrics. Countries won. Dolly's songwriting has been the crux of her more than 50-year music career. Before her 1967 debut album, Hello, I'm Dolly, she had written songs for other artists, and she has recorded almost 50 solo studio albums since. What's more, her solo albums have sold more than 100 million copies and made her country music's top-selling female artist of all time. Not bad. Although her staggering success hasn't been able to protect her from years of heartbreak, big boots to fill. Of course, Dolly has earned that accolade with an impressive slate of peers by her side throughout her decades-long music career. For example, she actually stood alongside Elvis very early on in her career. As for the King, he has become the top-selling musical artist of all time, having sold more than 1 billion of his records. Weak at the knees. When it comes to showmanship, Elvis is an undisputed champ. The hips, the quiff, the moves. There was a reason women went wild at his performances. No one can argue that he was a performer, and, like Dolly, he delved into both music and film, but his career differed from the coat of many colors. Songstress. In one major way, he did not write most of his songs. Instead, he recorded the works of more than 140 different songwriters. A true expert. So, did he deserve all that adoration? Thankfully, it seems the answer is yes. Most of those writers said that the King had more than earned his nickname, at least when it came to recording their songs in a satisfactory way. They said that he was an expert at understanding the feelings at the core of their compositions, but he still made every single track his own. More than just a pretty face. And that keen sensitivity and unique delivery made it possible for Elvis to cover a range of musical genres and topics throughout his recording career. He seamlessly shifted from rockabilly tunes to bluesy tracks to introspective love ballads to songs that highlight social issues from his era. One example from the latter category was his 1969 comeback hit In the Ghetto, which told the tragic story of an impoverished child born in Chicago, a turning point. Around the same time, Dolly's career hit a turning point too. She had become a series regular on country musician Porter Wagoner's eponymous TV show in 1967. But by the early 1970s, she felt ready to set out on her own. She had always envisioned a career as a solo artist, not as one half of a duo. Stuck. When Dolly wanted to leave the show, though, she was met with opposition from Wagoner. As she recalled to Compt in 2011, there was a lot of grief and heartache there, and he just wasn't listening to my reasoning for my going. To better understand her own emotions about the situation, she knew what she had to do. She had to write a song about it. Inspiration struck. Out of that heartbreak came one of the greatest songs in Dolly's archive. She said, I went home and out of a very emotional place in me at that time. I wrote the song, I Will Always Love You. She wasted no time in playing it for Wagoner either, and it would garner quite the reaction from her aunt. Stage partner. The very next day, when Dolly went into work the next day, she played the song for Wagoner, and her mentor couldn't hide how emotional it made him. She described the moment to the Tennessean in 2015, saying, he started crying. When I finished, he said, if you're that strong about it, just go on providing it. Get to produce that record, because that's the best song you ever wrote. Walking away. Although many people interpret I Will Always Love You as a romantic ballad, Dolly wrote it to encompass how fond she was of Wagoner. Although she knew she had to walk away from him and his show, she told Sim, it's saying, just because I'm going don't mean I won't love you. I appreciate you and I hope you do great. And I appreciate everything you've done, but I'm out of here. Top of the charts. That message has clearly resonated with listeners ever since Dolly released the song back in 1974, and sweetly enough, just as Wagoner had requested, he was the one who produced the chart-topping track. That version landed at #1 in the country charts, as did the 1982 recording that she made for the soundtrack of her movie The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. Copycats. As with many Dolly songs, though, other artists tried their hand at re-recording I Will Always Love You. You can probably hear the most famous iteration now. Yes, it was Dolly who wrote that 1992 Whitney Houston classic, which she covered for the soundtrack of her film, The Bodyguard. And surely we all know what came next. Record-breaking run. Yup, Houston's powerhouse recording shot to the top of the Billboard charts and stayed there for a then record-breaking 14 weeks. Many consider it to be the singer's signature song, and it is certainly one of the most successful singles in the history of music, selling more than 20 million copies internationally. If fate had fallen a little differently, though, then the iconic soundtrack may have sounded pretty different. Interestingly enough, Dolly had somewhat offhandedly agreed to allow the song to be used in The Bodyguard. Kevin Costner, who produced and starred in the movie with Houston, had originally chosen a different ditty, What Becomes of the Broken-Hearted, for his co-star to sing. But then they got the word that the same song would be used in another movie, Fried Green Tomatoes. A twist of fate. And that was that. But as fate would have it, Costner landed on another song he loved, Dolly's I Will Always Love You, the songwriter told Calm in 2012. They were just in a panic at the last minute, and so they asked me about the song. I sent it. I didn't hear anything more, that is, of course, until Houston's soulful version of the ballad came out and took the world by storm, bringing in the big bucks. Because Dolly had written the song, she also made money when Houston's re-recording sold millions of copies. The success of her own take on the track earned her big bucks, too. Experts estimate that the Jolene songstress has made millions of dollars for writing the song and owning the rights to it. All by herself, a savvy move. Then, the king wanted in. There could have been one more incredible entry into the I Will Always Love You catalog, though. Another huge star, one of Dolly's contemporaries in the 1970s, wanted his chance to record a new version of the iconic track. She wrote about it in the Big Issues letter to my younger self, as shared by in May in 2020. An offer you can't refuse. That's right, the king wanted in. Dolly revealed that the mystery man who had wanted to record I Will Always Love You was none other than Elvis himself, she wrote. I'd been invited down to the studio to meet Elvis and be there when he sang my song, as most music lovers would have at the time. She felt thrilled by the prospect of working with such a big name. Everything changed. Even as a bona fide superstar herself, Dolly still said that having Elvis record her song was the most exciting thing that had ever happened to her. She then added, "Who doesn't love Elvis?" Unfortunately, things wouldn't remain so exhilarating for very long. Fast forward to the few days before the studio session then, and Dolly would receive a phone call that would change everything. One fateful phone call. The man on the other end of the line was Colonel Tom Parker, who managed Elvis's career at the time. Dolly recalled the phone call he made to her in an interview with Canadian TV network NBC in 2016. According to her, Parker said, "Now, you know Elvis don't record anything unless we get half the publishing." And it was those 13 words that were the catalyst for what was to come. Give up her rights. When Parker referenced publishing, he meant that his client wanted his name on the copyright for the composition of I Will Always Love You alongside Dolly's. That way, Elvis would receive half of the royalties anytime the composition was used commercially ever again. To have him record her song, then Dolly would have to give up half of her rights to it. Not for sale. In spite of the excitement she felt when Elvis wanted to record her song, Dolly couldn't take the deal. She told NBC that she had told Parker, "Well, this has already been a hit for me, and this is my publishing company, and I can't give you half of it." With that, Elvis's manager called off his client's re-recording of the track. No easy decision, Dolly added, and I said, "Well, I am really sorry to hear that because I already told everybody Elvis was doing my song, but I thought I can't do it. And I didn't, so I thought, well, it was just one of those first really hard business decisions I had to make, aside from the business. Though, how did it make the queen of country feel? I cried all night long. Even though it was a business decision, it broke Dolly's heart. She wrote in the big issue, and I cried all night long because I was so disappointed. It wasn't Elvis. I loved Elvis, and I'm sure he was as disappointed as I was because he had it all worked up and ready to go. A smart move. Of course, Dolly's decision ended up being the smartest, financially speaking. She retained the publishing rights for her song, which became a huge hit in the 90s for Houston, and made the songwriter millions of dollars in the process. Still, she told Stacey that she would have liked to hear his version of the song, and she's not the only one. Special meaning. That's not all, though. Dolly wrote in her big issue letter that she eventually found out that the song was special to Elvis, according to his ex-wife, Priscilla. The songwriter recalled how his former spouse said that he sang that song to her when they were coming down the steps of the courthouse. After they divorced, that really touched me. Lifelong regret. Unfortunately, Dolly never had the chance to bury the hatchet with Elvis, who passed away in 1977, only 3 years after she released I Will Always Love You. Perhaps that's why she said that if she could have a conversation with anyone who had ever lived, it would be him. According to Emmy, but what would she say if she had the chance? Lost words. In fact, Dolly had even imagined how that conversation would go. She said, I'd probably talk about I will always love you and say, hey, I bet you were as disappointed as I was about all that. And I still dream about you singing that song, but that's not the only way she has heard her would-be. Collaboration with the king? Buried in the music. Dolly revealed, matter of fact, I even wrote a song called I Dreamed About Elvis last night, and I had an Elvis sound-alike sing it with me. The clever songwriter made sure that her new ditty contained 5 words in particular so that she could almost hear Elvis sing them. I will always love you. Well, yet more proof that there's far more to Dolly than great hair and rhinestones. One day, fans of Elvis, Dolly, or both may be intrigued to hear the songstress ode to the one-time king of rock and roll. If you feel that way, you're in luck, she revealed. One day, I'm going to put that track out. The track may not make as big of an impact as I Will Always Love You, but it will certainly close an emotional chapter for the legendary songwriter.